Hey folks, welcome back to Let's Play Final Fantasy XIII-2. I'm the Mysterious JG. Well, I pulled out, because it's my best hope of actually remembering the story, I've pulled out the strategy guide, and I'm going to go through the story real quick with you, just to recap where we're at. So, at the beginning of the game, for reasons that are not explained, Lightning is dressed up as some kind of fantasy hot chick, which I guess she already was a fantasy hot chick, but I mean specifically like the kind of thing that you'd see if you go to like a Micro Center. You guys have Micro Center, right? If you go to a place where you buy computer stuff and you want to like build your own computer, so you're buying like a fancy graphics card, it's either going to have a dragon, some kind of spaceship, or it's going to have like a woman wearing like sexy armor or holding like an elven bow and with big elven titties. So yeah, Lightning is dressed like that, and she's hanging out, and she bows towards some throne, and then some purple-haired like punk rock dude comes out and is like, "Roar," and she fights him. But then Noel falls out of the sky, and she's like, "Hey Noel, you need to go do something," and he's like, "What?" And she's like, "You'll figure it out." Then we go to Sarah without Stud. Whether Stud is Noel or Snow doesn't matter in this case, because Sarah is like explaining how I live in a village called New Bottom. It has like 2 buildings, and all those characters you didn't care about in the last game called from Nora are around. But Lightning's gone and Snow is gone. So nobody except for Sarah remembers the ending of Final Fantasy XIII the way that we do. They all remember Lightning, but they remember Lightning dying in the big cataclysm at the end of Final Fantasy XIII, which wasn't a cataclysm per se, but Cocoon is like saved from crashing into the earth and everyone dying by the Space Australians turning into a crystal pillar. So everybody's happy and safe except the Space Australians, but everybody except for Sarah now remembers that Lightning died as part of that she also turned into a crystal pillar. Sarah doesn't think that happened, and she can't figure out what the hell's going on. And Snow's like, I'm a dumbass who likes to punch my own hand, but I at least trust my girlfriend, so I'm going to go out and try to figure out what's going on. So he leaves, and then she has a nightmare, and her schoolgirl clothes transform into her goofy outfit that she's wearing in this game, and bugs attack the village. But Noel appears out of the sky and helps her defeat the bugs. Then she and Noel wander around, and they end up finding a space-time vortex and traveling to 4 years in the future, where they go to some kind of ruined excavation site where basically you have the ruins of some ancient civilization or something, and they wander around. They get attacked by Atlas, the big giant monster from the last game's post-game stuff, where you fight monsters and get stronger, and you are encouraged to go through the Titan's trials. Well, he actually talked and stuff, if I remember correctly. But now he doesn't. Now he's just a giant monster. And you wander around in these ruins, and you encounter some girl, and you end up finding this Titan thing is like phasing in and out of reality and wrecking shit, and you end up finding a like ancient machine that you use to control the Titan, but you don't really control it. You just reduce it to like 5% of its health and defeat it, and that stops this ruined site, which is being patrolled by a bunch of soldiers who don't have names and some girl who is part of the academy. And you defeat the giant monster, and that makes everyone happy. The academy, you find out, is this like group of scientists with military support that is currently running the world. So then you travel through time again, and this time you end up at a different place. You end up at Yasaf Mashif, which is a map from the previous game where you found these ancient ruins. But this time you go there, and there's the Academy has built a research station there as well, and you encounter Hope, who's like grown into a young man, and you also encounter the girl whose name I keep forgetting, who is you encountered her at 5 as fuck, but now it's 10 as fuck, and she looks exactly the same, like literally it is the same model, similar to when Lulu was 9 months pregnant and was still wearing that corset. So anyway, Hope and her talk to you, and they're like, hey, you should go travel through time and stuff, and there's some machine called the Oracle Drive, and it can see the future, and I really don't remember anything about the Oracle Drive except that there was one. So then you start traveling around, and you go to Erba, 200 as fuck, and Erba was the place that we've only ever seen in a ruin, even though it's the village where the Space Australians grew up, and used to be full of Space Australians. In Final Fantasy XIII and Final Fantasy XIII-2, despite it having time travel, we always see it as a ruin where nobody lives. And in this game, when you go there, you encounter the punk rock guy from the beginning of the game, whose name is Caius, and some girl, and the girl is like, she looks like she's like 11 years old, but Noel totally wants to bone her, which is as a side effect of the fact that Noel wants to bone this 11-year-old girl. And that's actually one of the reasons why Sarah and Noel's relationship is so sweet, because you have a male and female protagonist who team up and never actually seem to flirt that much, and they're actually able to go out and have an adventure where neither of them is trying to get into the other's pants. So anyway, you find Caius and this girl, and there's like dialogue, and you fight Caius because Caius is like, you guys are traveling through time, and that's going to fuck shit up, and I'm going to stop you. And Noel knows Caius, but refuses to explain who Caius is because he has convenient memory loss. Then you end up bouncing around. You go to like an alternate version of Yasif Mashif, and you do something there, and you go to the void beyond, and you wander around in this like void that's out of space and time. I don't really remember why you do that, except that you do that. And then eventually you go to the Sunleth Waterscape, which is this jungle which is on Cocoon because they're recycling a map, even though it would make perfect sense for you to find something like this on Pulse, which is where this game really should be set. But anyway, at Sunleth Waterscape, the point of that is that you find Snow, because Snow left to go figure out what happened to Lightning on Sarah's behalf. And you find Snow, and he's like, Sarah, and she's like, stud. And the only problem with this is that it's 300 as fuck. So, like, the question arises, why isn't Snow 300 years old if Sarah and Snow's native time is 1 as fuck? Really should be 0 as fuck, but I believe they call it 1 as fuck. But then you find out that Snow is also able to travel through time, and that doesn't make any sense, but it happens anyway. So he can't join your party, though, because you travel in time through gateways, and he can't go through gateways, and that's not really explained either that I remember. But eventually you go to the Coliseum, and you have dialogue, and then you leave, because it's basically telling you, hey, get the DLC, which is set in the Coliseum. It's really cool. You can't do anything with it here, though. And you come back to Sunleth Waterscape, and you and Snow and Noel and whatever monster you've got fight a giant tomato monster, because the giant tomato monster is apparently going to destroy everything because it is eating away at the crystal pillar from the last game that holds Cocoon in the Sky. Boy, I'm realizing now, I'm assuming you know a lot of stuff about the first game before this makes sense, huh? Anyway, oh boy, I'm going to spend the whole video on this, aren't I? So you end up defeating the giant monster. At least you defeat it enough that you slow its progress, and then you travel through time, and you go to the Arcalite Step, and something happens there where you defeat some monsters, and the game has this kind of vague explanation that, the reason that giant tomato monster is so powerful is because something else is happening that's temporal paradox, and you go and defeat some monster that is causing a temporal paradox, and it's at the Arcalite Step, and defeating it means when you go back to the Sunleth Waterscape, the giant tomato monster isn't as giant as it was, and you're now able to defeat it, and you think maybe you've saved everything, but then you leave, and Snow is left behind, and we kind of get revealed that Snow is a Seath, or Lassie again, and that's supposed to be a big deal, but who cares? So you travel to Academia, 400 as fuck, and you're like, hey, cool, we traveled to the future, now we can see what kind of life people have built for themselves in the future now that we're free of the fal'Cie. And that life never seems to be settling on the world of Pulse, which is this huge world bigger than any that they'd ever known that they could like tame and thrive on. But instead, they're constantly trying to rebuild Cocoon. Anyway, sorry. But Academia is a city that's on Cocoon, and it's 400 years in your future, and everybody in the city turns into monsters and attacks you because you find out, oh no, they built their own fal'Cie, and the fal'Cie is evil. That seems like it was a stupid idea. So you end up talking to Snow, and what you find out, or not Snow, Hope, who's like Science Man in this game, and you find out, oh yeah, no, I started this project to build a fal'Cie because I figured we could build it and control it and it would be a good idea, but I guess it wasn't a good idea, huh? Let's get rid of it. So you have a couple of levels worth of someplace called Augusta Tower where you're fighting, and you have like android replicas of humans that were built by the fal'Cie in the fal'Cie. You end up fighting Caius in the dystopian city of the future where it's raining and people turn into monsters. But then eventually, and he tells you, go to this tower, and you follow him to the tower. But then you find out that he is actually also an android replica, and it's just getting stupid now. Anyway, android replica version of him is not really... That's just a complete... Basically, the game just like decides, hey, you know what? Caius is the main villain, but let's forget about him for a couple of hours of gameplay, and you'll fight against an AI that was built by humans and turned evil, and that could have been its own game, but whatever. So you get to this thing and you fight it, and it keeps regenerating itself, and what you figure out is, oh no, this thing is a creature of the paradox, and it is using paradox power to revive itself when we defeat it. What can we do? And you yell something about how mad you are at Hope, who built it in the first place, and somehow what you yell travels through the temporal paradox, so Hope hears it, and then he doesn't build the machine at all, and thus it is undone. It's all very silly, and it has nothing to do with the end of the game. Like, they just did a couple of hours of, like, side game that has nothing to do with anything else. So now you're back to business as usual, and you go to Academia, and it's no longer dystopia because, A, it's not raining, and B, people aren't turning into monsters. And now you're, like, sent off on a side quest where you have to collect graviton energy cores or something. I don't know. You get sent on a series of fetch quests in order to progress past Academia for XX as fuck, because they're like, hey, we've got this powerful new thing that'll let us send you to the heart of the temporal distortions and fix everything, but you have to do fetch quests first. So you do fetch quests, and then you get to go into the temporal distortion, and it's going to send you to wherever you need to go to win the game. But then you find out that the girl whose name I keep forgetting, and I never actually understood this the first time I played the game. I only figured it out through A, the hint book, and B, paying more attention this time. But she somehow betrayed you because she at some point figures out that she's not supposed to be alive either, but she's also a temporal paradox. She was supposed to die when Cocoon fell, but she didn't. And she's not dead because of temporal paradox, so she's actually secretly trying to stop you, even though I assumed the first time I played through the game her whole motivation is that she wants to have sex with Hope. I think she wants both to have sex with Hope and also to not die, because she'll die if you guys succeed in stopping the temporal paradoxes, or she'll phase out of existence or something. So anyway, because she sabotaged you and somehow is working with Caius, and you go to the Void Beyond again, only this time when you go to the Void Beyond, you have a whole bunch of series of discussions with the other girl whose name I keep forgetting, Yule, the one who looks like she's 11. And Yule is a seeress, but this is where it gets really weird and stupid. She is a seeress that she has like mystical powers to see the future and can like guide people towards the correct future events, but it turns out that she's like a recurring reincarnating person who's been around since the ancient times of whatever, and like she comes from the ancient city of Pedra, which again, we never actually see any of these ancient places. Despite the game being about time travel, you never travel back in time and see any of the backstory stuff when it was up and running. But yeah, the people of Pedra were like using Cirruses to try to manipulate fate and prevent their own city from being destroyed, but somehow it didn't work. And every time the Cirrus sees into the future, her life gets shorter, and they keep dying. And Caius, who is also in love with the 11-year-old girl, I guess, although it seems a little bit more fatherly and less creepy and sexual than Noel's love, although it still seems creepy and sexual. But anyway, Caius is trying to destroy the fabric of space and time because somehow that's going to stop Yule from dying over and over and over. But even though I just explained all that, I think it's around this time that we start to find out that there's even more weirdness going on with the temporal bullshit and frickin' I think what's happening is that the goddess Etro is the goddess of chaos, and Yule kind of explains something about how she made lightning her guardian, and she also put chaos power into Caius and makes them immortal guardians. And it's Etro, she's the goddess of chaos, which makes her sound like some kind of baddie, but she's actually not bad, because chaos is like part of human nature is chaos. This kind of gets fleshed out even more in goofy ways in the next game. But there's like an infinite supply of chaos outside of their world, and Etro controls the floodgates, and she allows chaos to come into the world because that's part of like human energy and spirit and whatever, but she has to control how much comes in, and she's always using her godly powers to keep the gates sealed to prevent chaos energy from flowing in and destroying everything. But somehow this is responsible for Yule dying, so Caius is like, I'm sick of watching Yule die and reincarnate, it's bullshit, I want to destroy all life. And in order to do that, he has to kill the goddess Etro, because if he kills the goddess Etro, all the chaos flows in and destroys the world. And Lightning's trying to stop him, because Lightning, the reason no one everyone thinks she's dead, is because Etro plucked her out of time when she saved the world at the end of Final Fantasy XIII to make her a knight of Etro who would guard Etro, because Etro is trying to save everybody, but never appears as a character. So Caius is evil because even though he was given chaos power, he's using it to try to kill the goddess of chaos. And Lightning is good because she's trying to protect the goddess of chaos. And we're wandering around not knowing what the hell's going on. And finally, in order to escape from the void and get back on track, we end up getting dumped into the far future, which is where Noel comes from, where he's one of the last 3 people on Earth, the other 2 being Yule and Caius. Because Yule and Caius are both quasi-immortal, because Yule always reincarnates, and Caius is immortal because he's the guardian of chaos, even though Lightning is the guardian of chaos. But Noel doesn't seem to know anything about either of them. He's just wandering around with them being a third wheel, and Caius keeps telling Noel, hey, you gotta kill me. Like, I'm gonna train you up, but you gotta kill me and become the new guardian. Even though I don't think Noel understands what it means to be the guardian of chaos. But maybe he does, and he doesn't remember it now because of amnesia? I don't know, but Sarah experiences hallucinations of a world where Lightning and Snow are both living with her in New Bottom, and everything's hunky-dory, but it's all an evil illusion by Caius to distract her. And she breaks free of the illusions and returns to the real world. And they imply that Noel is also being shown illusions of his ultimate perfect life, except that it's actually his reality, and his reality's fucking awful because he's one of the last 3 people on Earth, and he can't have his girlfriend because his girlfriend kind of wants Caius, I guess. Maybe I'm making that part up. But yeah, Caius ends up leaving, and then Yule dies and doesn't reincarnate, or Noel doesn't know she's going to reincarnate. So Noel is left all alone by himself, and a female singer sings about being the last boy, or like when she was just a boy. And then Sarah shows up and is like, what the fuck are you doing? Come on, Stud, let's get going. And he's like, oh, yeah, sorry. And they shake it off, and they go to Academia 500 as fuck, because what they find out now is that Caius wants to unleash a flood of chaos because that'll somehow happen if he destroys academia. Because if a bunch of people die at the same time, their souls leave our world and go into the chaos world, so the gate has to open. But if a bunch of people die all at once, it opens really wide, and then the chaos will flow out the other way, because there's like a displacement of chaos, some kind of physical principle where, like, you know, if you got two different containers of water and they're connected, and you open it, and then the one that's more full will decrease and fill up the other one. Yeah, I guess there's some kind of liquid chaos displacement theory that's at work here. And yeah, so anyway, you remember how the first game was about how this evil guy Bartandalus wanted to kill lots of people at the same time because that was going to trigger something special to happen? And he had, I won't even bother to explain what it was, but his whole thing is, I want to kill a whole bunch of people at the same time because that will achieve my mystical goal. Well, Caius wants to kill a whole bunch of people at one time to achieve his mystical goal. And again, all the people who used to live on Cocoon have decided to build a new Cocoon and live in that rather than living on Pulse, which is the actual fucking planet where there's room for everybody to live. They just have to, like, there's monsters on Pulse, but there's monsters in Cocoon. They just need to freaking deal with the monsters. They got guns. It shouldn't be that big a deal. But instead they decide they're going to build a new Cocoon to replace the old Cocoon that's going to, because eventually the old Cocoon will crash. But if they can build a new Cocoon, it'll be fine. But Caius is going to crash the old Cocoon into the new Cocoon to murder everyone. And he's going to do that in 500 as fuck. And that's where we are now, folks. We're at 500 as fuck. They're about to launch a brand new Cocoon, but right at that moment, Caius is going to fuck everything up with evil chaos power, because somehow that will help the 11-year-old girl that he's in love with. And we have to stop him. But when we come here, we find it's all full of, like, weirdo spinning around platforms, and that's probably because of chaos energy or temporal distortions, but I'm not really sure. I ended up getting 20 minutes out of trying to explain this plot. It makes less sense to me than it did when I started, and I almost apologize. I might, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking maybe I get rid of the background, because I did this whole thing over the menu screen. I don't think I have the energy or patience to create a slideshow like I did when I explained the ending of Final Fantasy XIII. But maybe just so it's easier to hear me and not hear the music, I will do some kind of bumper. I don't know. Or I might just do it over the menu screen. Who cares? Either way, I'm going to call it a video now because there's only a few minutes left. And I spent the whole video explaining the story, and I hope it was amusing. I really don't know if it was. Let me know, guys, and I'll catch you guys next time when we proceed towards the end of the game. And as I said before, try to stop Caius from crashing the old Cocoon into the new Cocoon and killing everybody. Alyssa? Was that her name? I think it might have been Alyssa. Bye.